Hello, another interesting link in regarding the pyramids of Giza, where we see here, and I will put again the link in the description, and I won't go through it. I'll leave it up to you to read the links. But the point of this particular one is so ancient writers such as Diodorus, Herodotus, and Strabo, which are fairly credible and how they describe the pyramids, and it has a lot to do with the tomb theory in there. So I'll leave that up to you, make of it as what you will, but they talk about the tomb theory and essentially the Cheops or the Great Pyramid and Khafre or Kephrem has these ancient writers describe who were in contact with Egyptians going back 2,500 to 2,000 years, and how these these Egyptians spoke of the pyramids and the tomb theory. Now, they were separated from the pyramids themselves by 2,000 years, so let's not, they were very, very distant from, even by the official timeline, they were at least 2,000 years separated from that period. But we accept the Egyptian descriptions when it's suitable to us, and we ignore them when it's not so suitable to certain theories. But they talk about the pyramids as a tomb, and the reason why no body was found in, especially the Great Pyramid and the Pyramid of Khafre, because those kings were basically hated by the people. As where the smallest of the three Giza pyramids, the Menkaure Pyramid, the Menkaure Pyramid, they describe this king as as a beloved king, as where Khafre and or Cheops were described as basically tyrants. And I will leave it up to you to read these descriptions based on Herodotus, Strabo, and Diodorus, and again make of it what you will. But among the ancient Egyptians, the departed soul, pure and faithful, became absolutely one with the universal soul, and the same name as Osiris. So what we do have is that these so Osiris would be connected to a beloved king, but the Cheops or Khufu and Khafre don't seem to be beloved kings, and the Osiris would not follow their names all the time. But again, I'll leave that to you. I don't have a horse in this race. I don't really care if it was a tomb or not. But just as a link to these ancient writers, and again, you can follow the references described therein. But these Strabo, for instance, mentioned now Strabo, Diodorus, and Herodotus were there at the time when the casing stones were still on the pyramids. And Strabo mentions that there was a door that you could enter through the main entrance, not the robber's entrance, but through the main entrance you could still enter the Great Pyramid, for instance, and that when the door was closed, you couldn't even discern. It was so well cut that you couldn't discern the difference from there. Now, I'm not again, I don't have a horse in this race. I don't really care either way. But just as a description to these older writers who were in contact with Egyptian priests who were much closer in contact with the previous generations as opposed to maybe not Manetho, but at least Josephus and these other sources of information in regards to the ancient pyramids there. And so, yeah, link will be in the description. I think it's worth reading because these ancient writers who have, Herodotus, Strabo, Diodorus were credible for the most part, but also because they would reference other writers, there is some stuff that they wrote which is, a little bit iffy, but that was usually when they were quoting other people. But they did visit this site, talk to the Egyptian priests who were there at the time. But even again, I'll just to repeat, those Egyptian priests were separated by at least 2,000 years from, that's according to the official timeline, they were at least 2,000 years from the construction of the pyramids. But these Greek and Roman writers do point at the fact that the pyramid was accessible, the interior was accessible back in their time, and including Pliny. So Pliny's another one. Both. Anyway, link will be in the description, and it's an interesting read. Again, I don't really have a horse in this race. I don't really know. And to be honest, I don't really care. But I am interested in gaining as much information as is possible, and using an evidence-based argument. And there is some credibility to these older writers, and at the very least, they challenge the accepted version of things about when the internal structures of a pyramid were available. For instance, in here they described the Egyptians and the Egyptians loved Menkaura because he opened the pyramids to the people, as where Khafre and Khufu were basically tyrannical kings, as they describe, who would not allow the general people or access to the temples of the pyramids themselves. It also explains why there was no bodies found in the pyramids, because the Khufu and Khafre were so, they were so disliked that they actually feared being that their tomb would be desecrated. So that's one description based on these ancient writers as well. So those kings were not buried in there because they basically feared for their bodies and that being desecrated. Again, I'm not proposing any idea. I'm just providing a link here to these ancient writers. And so Pliny, Herodotus, Strabo, and Diodorus, these ancient writers, much closer to the origins of the Egyptian priests and history than what we are. And so, for instance, the famous Kings list that's mentioned, which is often used as a reference to promote a different timeline, it must be said that the Kings list does not include Akhenaton, who was a king basically about 1300 BC. So again, I would say that using the Kings list as a reference is very problematic, because there are not just Akhenaton, but other kings were written out of a Kings list. The Kings list was written well after this period. So the Kings list basically has the same credibility as these other ancient Greek, Roman writers who based their descriptions on the Egyptian priests. So again, take the Kings list with a pinch of salt, because the list is missing several important kings. They weren't scratched out from the list. For instance, Akhenaton and Nefertiti were scratched out and basically removed from history. Okay, I'll pause for a moment. Okay, the Kings list, the beautiful Nefertiti trampled in the dirt. This is from the Nicholson Museum here in Sydney, Australia, which has basically the largest collection of antiquities in the southern hemisphere. And amongst the stones here, they have a stone which references Nefertiti, the wife of Akhenaton. Akhenaton is not included on the Kings list, as well as many other kings. So that's why I'm saying be very, very careful of those who reference the Kings list as a very accurate source, because Akhenaton and Nefertiti were scratched out or either destroyed, and there are even other records where the name Akhenaton has been scratched out. So we know he was there, as where the Kings list does not even include him. The Kings list was written well after Akhenaton, and so it has the same, let's say, historic value as what does the descriptions of Diodorus, Herodotus, Strabo, and Pliny. And yeah, so that's, where are we? Yeah, so Nefertiti, Akhenaton were scratched out or destroyed, as where the Kings list does not even include them. So they were written well after Akhenaton. Be very, very cynical, not cynical, at least know this. This is an important point in regards to the Kings list, and those who would use it as a dating method. I would say if they don't include this information, problematic. They're not really telling you the whole truth, as where we see there are relics of Akhenaton and Nefertiti. Akhenaton scratched out, as where he's not even included in the Kings list. So you might think these Greco-Roman writers and the priests who told them these things are not necessarily the best source, but pardon me. Well, neither neither is the King's List, which is used as an example as well. So anyway, there's more information for you. Okay, well, so again, information is important. Details are important, and be wary of those who do not include contrary information. The point of when you present a theory, you must also present that which would disprove your theory. If you don't present the elements which disprove it, well, then it's not a theory, it's a dogma. And so with that, hope you enjoyed and have a good one. Details count.